You can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight, Revolution Radio. Thank you for joining us while we're streaming on many platforms. What would it look like, this world? Well, it would look like owning the weather. Would it not? The media's got to shift. They're done with last month. It's going to move to something new. What do you think it's going to move to? Let me guess. Let me scratch my head for those of you who cannot see me. Oh, climate change. You know it's going right there. The hottest summer ever, the warmest planet ever. In the last 40 years. Okay, whatever. Yeah, these old Ocean's records, yeah, since the last 150 years. Why don't they go back 400 years, 800 years, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, and then tell me that it's the warmest ever? That would involve cycles. We can't talk about cycles, electromagnetic cycles in the sun changing our own Earth's magnetic field, which in turn changes the jet streams in the cloud cells. Doesn't lock them in place as tightly. We don't have that very tight weather, which our whole agriculture system is based on. Plant by, harvest by date is now going out the window, literally. You can see everywhere control of what looks like the weather. Either the extreme electromagnetic effects from the planetary alignment in October of 2024 are starting to manifest as we see it, and this is the beginning of the extreme. It is going to go running from here. Or there's some intervention in there riding on top of a natural cycle. Just saying, just asking. Ransom, thanks for joining me tonight. I wanted to start the program with that because I knew you were looking for a little talk bit there to come back with, so I'm going to throw it right in the beginning. I forgot to add again. Ransom, my bad. I've done that to you before. Can you believe it? Oh, smack that dude with a spoon on the knuckle. Hold on, let me get him in here. I can't believe it. Ransom, I thought I had you on here. Let me add another person into this wonderful conversation. Technical difficulty. But I would ask everybody out there, think about how the things you're seeing, how it's all being pushed in one single, every single month, it's a different function of thought to distract and scare. So Ransom, thanks for joining me.
How's it going? So they got the super fear factor out there for everybody. They think they're dying in heat, of the worst heat ever, because they got some records that that are new since the 1970s. Well, they really go far back, like you're saying, huh? They go back as far as my lifetime, which is kind of telling you the secret there. They don't want you to think past several generations where they've already had their programs of propaganda up and running, and I see them thick. You could go to several of the news websites or Drudge. You could pick any one of them, and you'll see that the top headlines are about, it's hot in areas that are hot all the time. Like they're acting like Phoenix. I saw an article also about Death Valley. So we'll start with the Death Valley one. So they got this article out about some guy that died in Death Valley because they think it might have been 126 degrees there. But that's a common temperature there, right? That's one of the hottest places on the planet. And because one guy in 20 years died in Death Valley, they're going to harp, look, it's the climate's changing. And so what are they going to do about it? Well, they have these plans to, drain you of all essential wealth that you have, and occupy your time with worrying about how you behave. Do I put it in the plastic bin? Do I put it in the trash bin? Do they throw it all together anyway into a giant pyramid at the dump? I think they do, because I've seen it. So they're not really recycling it because, it's cheaper to make it new. They dug most of that stuff up out of the earth. So what's the big deal of dumping, giant plasticized, chemical laced, giant mounds of stuff there for us to live next to if you're fortunate enough to live in a city? Because I live in a pretty small city, and the size of the pyramid that they're building in the desert is mind blowing. It's like the Pyramid of Giza out there, and this is a small town. So you can imagine what they're doing, in some of the bigger cities with all of this debris that comes with the food industry. And that's a big deal, because think about all of these, where do all the toxins and carcinogens come from in our diet? It's almost all coming from manufactured goods. They have to wrap it, they have to package it, they have to ship it, they have to have it go down industrial manufacturing lines, and then they got to sterilize though from everything has to be sterilized, and there's all these concoctions from the different companies that are mandated to use for you to get your food. And then when the food starts, running out, they just raise the prices on those goods that you're used to getting and used to having. It's so funny that no one's noticed. So I don't know about where you live, but here we used to be a 24-hour society, even in this small town. And ever since the dreaded vid that went around, they had to take precautions for some reason and close things early. But they never opened back up. Not to mention all the mom and pops places that just disappeared over the past couple of years. All of the 24-hour places like CVS and Walgreens, Walmart, etc., they're closed. And then, say you want to back up and you need to get stuff, or you want to get stuff, you can go to the convenience stores that are all closed because they can't get enough people to work at them, because those people don't want to work for $15 an hour or whatever the current minimum wage is that helped inflate the rest of the value of the money. So it seems like they have this, we're at the end game here in their plan to totally devastate, destroy the economies across the planet, and then also at the same time, divide and conquer has never been more of a thing. I'm looking, you can pick a country, France, Spain, the United States, the UK, and in every one of these places, even Russia and Ukraine, they have some issue or something to polarize the population to, go at each other's throat. And you see how easily it is to get some people to go to war. So they just continue this. And I'm seeing several civil wars in the near future for Europe. Matter of fact, I actually, I was talking to my son today about, I was telling him, I think this is going to be one of those times in history like World War I and World War II, where you see countries disappear off the map forever into history because they either collapsed, were taken over, transitioned to a new empire, whatever the case may be. But yes, if you look through the headlines, they're trying to pump the fear factor up all the way until people are having a nervous breakdown or pulling out their hair, thinking that they're responsible for killing the planet, when in fact, overall, it's been getting cooler. And, say a record gets broken or tied, look at the amount of, exposure they try to give that, like if these are once in million year things that are happening and everything's going to shut down. What we're talking about is within 1 degree normal for most places, especially at this time of year. Are people not forgetting we're just in the first month of summer, and June is usually hot in the Southwest where I live, so we're living in 100-degree temperatures, but we all know that it can get much hotter here because it has. And they're scaring Phoenix people like they've never seen 115 when that's quite normal for the area. So what do you think? What's with the extra push just to scare everybody? Is it like, they've kind of moved, the governments and the propaganda machines have kind of moved like the old school department stores, where you would know what time of year it is because you'd walk in and they were pitching their Easter stuff or their Valentine stuff or their whatever it is. Now we have, virus times of the year, and we have climate time of the year that we celebrate. It's basically like that. They use the same sales marketing to kind of separate the year up into different fears that they could hammer for a few months at a time. it's so productive, and then you can move to politics. It's like some kind of soap opera, right? The West Wing. Whose cocaine is it? Oh, it's not my cocaine, it's their cocaine. Well, whose cocaine is it? Nobody knows whose cocaine is it. They dropped some cocaine. They can identify grandma from January 6th amongst thousands and thousands of people. They can SWAT team and find grandma, but they can't find Waldo that dropped the bag of cocaine in the White House. So that tells you that's what's going on at the top levels of our government. So don't worry about your food supply. Don't worry about, national security or any of that. They can't even figure out where, who dropped whose dope bag on the way to the bathroom or not.
Yeah, the White House should invest in some camera equipment to record for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Wonder if they've thought of that yet. Couldn't catch, well, eventually they'll catch up to the 7-day-a-week thing on the recording in the area. But these pyramids, are you talking about in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago? Talk about countries coming and going. Think about the Babylonian empires, the Mesopotamia and the Sumerians. You go from there as a start point. Now move through history into the modern map that we have. That's a massive change. And you also have to wonder how much and how many times the maps have been altered in terms of where land positions are now. Are we really supposed to believe that, it's crustal displacement at 1 millimeter per year and it takes this many years for this thing to move? And then a few years back, Japan had the big earthquake and now they're pouring the water back in the ocean again from Fukushima, but it moved the island chain 8 feet in one single event. But up to that point, it had been established science that plate tectonics are only moving 1 millimeter per year, and that's exactly how the Earth formed. And suddenly you get an 8-foot jump, and nobody questioned that. Like, how many more of those 8-foot jumps are there, and how regular are those 9.0 earthquakes that can jump and then subtract, quote unquote, millions of years of plate tectonics? And you have to wonder how much history has been altered itself. Like, they had some floods. Now, Ransom, in Telegram, I sent you a thing where they had a video. It was in Iran. They had massive floods, and it unburied an entire cultural layer below, a town that never knew it was even there. That's insane that it even happens today. And these temperatures, and by the way, if you want to go back and actually do some of your own research, I highly encourage you to do so, and I'll just give you a couple nuggets and you can look for it, because there are errors of our recent past. I'm not talking about 100 years, several hundred years. Yeah, there's been eras that have been warmer. We're close to exactly what we have today. The Dust Bowl era of the 1930s would be a good one. And you can learn all about the ClimateGate emails at the same time, how they tried to cool that 1930s period to make it look as if it was a continuous running upward curve, instead of having the 1930s pretty much equal to what we have now, or exactly equal, or even warmer with more dust. They call it the Dust Bowl for a reason, more erosion and sandstorms than we have now. And then that was the whole climate in the debate email, the whole ClimateGate. Remember that? It dropped off the radar. You never hear about ClimateGate emails anymore. There was a whole discussion of all this paid for UN scientists in the pockets of that had colluded together to come and try to cool the past, to make it appear that everything was running in a linear fashion since the 1800s, and we were responsible for it even during pre-revolutionary, what do you call the 1930s in terms of the mechanization and transportation we have today with vehicles, and air travel was nil almost. Ship traffic, yeah. But I mean, to the levels it is today, it's like, not comparable. You can go back to the Minoan warming period also. That's another big one. And how do you think the quote-unquote Vikings were inhabiting Greenland at the time? Medieval warming period is that one. That's even closer. And it's not evil, E-V-I-L, it's E-V-E-I-L, medieval. I would encourage you to check that one out too. because temperatures were warmer. And see, these are the things that they never want to go back into the past. You know, medieval times, when you think about that, you're not thinking that far back in the medieval times. Minoans, yeah, they're a bit further back. That's why I was talking about Mesopotamians, Sumerians, and you're coming up, and Assyrians, and then, you know, you're jumping into Aksum, and then we're getting close. Think about all of the times past that have been warmer than today, and somehow whoosh. Now I'll agree with you, Ransom. I will. If the temperature degrees were broken by like 10 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius, I'd be like, oh my, there's a huge problem. But being broken by a 10th of a degree and an 1/8 of a degree, you know, and I'll tell you something. When I do the Adapt 2030 channel and I report on these snowstorms that are in the winter, if it's like an 1/8 of an inch over, and the old record was like 30 inches or something, that's a non-story, really. Yeah, I broke a new record. Yeah, there was a little more precipitate. Okay. But if the old record was, say, 10 inches and the new record is 21 inches, I'm going to report that. That's like a doubling. That's astounding how much that is to double an old record. But for something to sneak in at like 1/2 a degree, and who knows, you know, the placement, again, another thing I would like to say about this is the placement of the thermometer and temperature stations in the modern day are very much in parking lots and near the end of airport runways and takeoff. And also near air conditioning, and you know, where you have air blowing out of building ventilation systems, etc. And the best one is when it's sitting on an outflow of a building ventilation system right in a parking lot, triangulating. Look, they'll get record highs all the time, because you got the asphalt heating up, and those stations should be in the middle of fields. But they're like, well, the city expanded and we couldn't save this place. It's in a parking lot now. Sorry, my bad. But you know, we adjusted it. It's in the median, in the middle of the parking lot. You know where the grass strip is in between the giant pools of asphalt on either side of it? Yeah, that's where the temperature station is. And I encourage you to look at that, where the temperature station placements were compared to today. I mean, it's astounding. You know, this kind of stuff is common knowledge for those who are you know, into this genre like myself, but a lot of people wouldn't understand that. You know, it just doesn't make the mainstream media. It just doesn't make it. It polarizes. Oh, it's hot, it's cold, it's not. And it, you know, Ransom, I'm going to add one more thing here. I was on Al Jazeera because I like to zip through there, and they have a real nice drop-down section that goes through the news in like the Middle East. It goes through the news in Africa. It goes through the news in Europe, Asia. It covers all the continents by news. So I go through there, see if there's anything major happening, and I just kind of peruse it. And you can do the same thing with economic news. So anyway, there's this article here, mapping the hottest temperatures around the world. And you know, when you were just talking, I was thinking the same thing. All right, I really want to see where it's hot. You guys are talking record this, record that, hottest planet ever. So I had to read the article, and mapping the hottest temperatures around the world. Think about around the world. At least 22 countries have recorded maximum temperatures of above 50 degrees Celsius. And I was like, yo, this is an intense article already. And then they currently registered California's Death Valley back in 1913. The hottest known temperature in Africa was 55 degrees Celsius in Kabylie, Tunisia in 1931. Iran holds the record for Asia's hottest official temperature, 54°C, in 2017. That's the first paragraph that I'm reading from you. Highest temperatures ever recorded is what it says right there as a headline, right under, before you start reading. And they tell you about 1913 hot temperature, 1931 hot temperature, and 2017. Highest temperature ever recorded in Europe. Okay. So why are they, again, the way they're phrasing it, and the way you look at this temperature, a lot of people don't have the time to even read into such a basic article like this. All they're going to do is scroll down and see the map, because everybody's fast. They're flicking through everything. They're not going to read. They're going to look for the map. And here's the map that accompanies the article says the highest temperatures ever recorded. And I look at it, and it's not very clean. Like, hey, these are from the past. But since all the hot article and hot news and everything's hot today, then suddenly you're looking at, oh, it must be today. And, you know, like psychologically, you think highest temperatures ever recorded. That's happening right now. Now look at the map, and it's red, and it's orange, and it's even more red and optic red, and just the planet's on fire. Even Antarctica is bright yellow. Like, what? Dude, they're in the wintertime now. Okay. Now look at this, and yeah, you would never you would never even consider that that was an article about past temperatures over 50 degrees Celsius. The way it's framed, the way it's referenced, the way it's plugged in. Most people would fall for that one. I must admit, it's cleverly written. The graphics were good because knowing that nobody would read it, and they would go from the headline, find the second headline, and go to the map. Like, that's how people browse news today. Taking advantage of all that skipped stuff called reading in the middle. And it's a shame that media is allowed to get away with it. And then, you know, I noticed this same article everywhere I went as well. Anytime I was chasing down news, I found the same exact article. And I encourage everybody to look at it. It's called Mapping the Hottest Temperatures Around the World. And that's the name of the article. Now, that is across every news syndication. That's the easiest article to find in the last 2 days. So, Ransom, I don't know, man. Where does it take us now? What's next? Yeah. Okay, so this, you know, we had the flag month last month. We got global warming month in July because everybody was out having barbecue, so maybe it was hot in their area, and then they could, oh, it was hot outside, it must be the hottest ever. It was hot, you know, it was hot. We had a barbecue in the middle of summer on a sunny day in the middle of the afternoon at the hottest time of the afternoon with the fire going. Gee, it was hot. All right, so I don't know where they take us from here. What do you think next month, August? What's the month of August? If we got Flag Month, Global Warming Month, then what's next? Do you think?
It might be like it's starving week, fast to save the planet. Don't, you know, there's no shave November. We could have no eat August or no eat September. What do you think about that? No, it's funny because when you really think about this with a little bit of you know, I don't know, critical thinking, maybe, even if you don't know anything about this topic and you just sit here and you read this one, Earth hit an unofficial record high temperature this week and stayed there. Oh my God. And then it starts out talking about sweltering heat is blanketing much of the planet, and one unofficial analysis says the past 7 days have been the hottest week on record, the latest grim milestone in a series of climate change driven extremes, right? Climate change, meaning man-made global warming. And then when you look down here, what they're talking about, it says that for 7-day period ending Wednesday, the daily average temperature was 0.08 degrees Fahrenheit or 0.04 degrees Celsius, higher than any week in 44 years of record keeping. So what they're saying is 44 years ago.
Ransom, I'm sorry.
Hold on. Okay.
8/100ths of a degree is what you're saying. 8/100ths of 1 degree.
That's right. Statistically zero.
Yeah, that's a rounding error.
Yeah. So, but keep in mind this. So they just got through telling you and trying to convince you that this is the latest in climate crisis, driven emergencies and extremes. But it says right here, 44 years ago, since they've been taking records, it's 44 years ago. They're meaning that we had that hot a temperature about 50 years ago. It was doing that. And so if we've been driving the climate to get warmer, why was it already warm 50 years ago? Who was doing it then? Was no one doing it then? Because I don't think you could argue that the same amount of industry or pollutants or any of your arguments that they use in the modern argument against, science, any of the arguments they have, it's just not going to make any sense. So were they doing that then? And then, like you said, you got to think about it on the bigger scale. What were Neanderthal and all of them doing? What was Cro-Magnon man and the Neolithic people doing that caused, different melts? Were they driving around their SUVs right before the Hunger Dryas? Is that what it is? I don't think so, but just a little bit of critical thinking in the thing. They're right there saying that statistically it didn't get any warmer than zero in 44 years. Imagine that. And they do this type of thing all the time. They'll say it's got hotter, 0.0 this or point this or whatever. But any number, any basic kid that went to 4th grade math knows any number that's not 1 is less than 1 is called a zero. Or statistic zero, unless it keeps going into the negative. I just thought I would point that out. But they keep doing that. They keep just throwing out these articles. You would think that we're all dying. And then you got this other one that you were talking about a minute ago that's got all of these bright, colors on there that it's like the terror watch list colors. Oh, my God. I hope I don't live in one of those maroon or red places. That would be devastating. But they don't actually show you the map. And you know, we were talking about that last week. Everybody will point out the heat wave and not talk about how you could travel 100 miles to the west or to the north or whatever. And then there, you know, in that area, they happen to be having a degree or two below average temperatures right next to their supposed record-breaking heat temperatures. But we all know, living in the U.S., if you have any kind of memory, that we have these heat waves that happen time to time. And this one that they're trying to pump up is relatively mild. I mean, we're as far as I'm concerned, where I live, we're having exactly normal weather. The only difference being, you know, usually we get some monsoon on July 4th, and we didn't this year, but I'm sure it's coming up soon. But as far as the heat goes, this is nothing out of the ordinary. But from the local news, in the state news and the national news, you would think that we're all going to die any time now just because, well, it's summer.
Yeah, summer in the southeast U.S. You know, we used to make jokes about how hot it would get before the hype was around. And we're talking like 80s and 90s, 1980s, 1990s. You know, you're down in the southeast U.S., it's always hot. They don't call it the dog days of summer for nothing. They don't have the thing about sitting around on the front porch drinking iced tea in the hottest time of the day trying to get a breeze on the thing for nothing. You know, these are like, it was so hot down here before, it's still hot as could be in the summer. But you know, nobody wants to talk about the snow. You know why? And Ransom, I think you know a place called Utah. Ski Utah released a new survey of the year's skiing. 13 out of 15 ski areas in Utah broke their all-time highest, deepest snowfall records. And 10 out of 15 resorts had their longest ski season ever. Over 200 days of skiing. An insane amount of change there, but why does nobody want to talk about that? It's these little things. Okay, if it was a couple ski resorts had the all-time record snowfalls, well, that means that entire area, and then over in California also, record snowpack across there. They have massive flooding. They're just like releasing massive amounts of water into the ocean because every one of their dams, and it's completely full. It's overspilling. They need to release it. Like, and there's still snow melt up there. Unbelievable. Just the amount that came down, you know, they were reacting. The experts were, and again, this is the thing about the expert. They were telling us 3 years ago, California's going into a drought. It's the biggest drought in 1,200 years. And they had no idea when it would alleviate. And they were predicting in 10, 15 years of mega drought, people would need to leave these areas in California because there'd be no water. It was going to continue into another 15. It'll be the biggest thing ever. This is going to shift California agriculture. We're going to have to move. We're going to have to ration water right now. Everybody's going to have to do this. And then 3 years later, they have so much water, literally record snowpack, that they're dumping it in the ocean because their dams are going to overtop. And these are the same morons that are still giving you the news. Now, why is nobody talking about the all-time record highest, deepest snowfalls blanketing California all the way over to Utah? Does that not make a discussion in the all-time record cold smashing through Washington and Oregon as well? In the summertime, below freezing temperatures already in British Columbia. Nobody wants to talk about that? Like, what? Okay. What about the all-time record cold smashing across Australia? No, you don't. It's way up into the outback. You know, it's up near Cape York, and like Indonesia is going to get some record cold temperatures out of this. That's insane. Nobody wants to talk about that. But no, it's hot here. So Utah received 219% of its average snowpack, meaning more than double. So that is a real story. Not a 0.08, which is 8/100ths of 1 degree. We are talking about a full 119% increase, doubling plus. At full 100 of those. Not sometimes I laugh at these absurdities. You have to realize that front page news thing is 8/100ths of 1. That's making news. Yet thousands of times more than that increase doesn't even make the news. Hi, what do we do, man? Are they going to have avalanches in Utah? You tell me, Ransom. I mean, what's going on? Because you talked about there being, in our valley tonight out here, there was dense fog. That fog usually doesn't come in until September. It was, for me, it was a little caught me off guard. I went outside and there's this huge fog bank. Now, I expect that at the end of the year when the temperatures are changing between night and day, and you get some, you can expect that, but not now in the middle of summer. I don't know. I'm seeing some changes here in East Tennessee in the lower valleys around 1,000 feet or so. So, Ransom, what? Tell me about the snow. What's going on there? Oh, and Yamaha announces it will no longer make snowmobiles. Yamaha is discontinuing production of snowmobiles due to fill in the blank. Climate change, worries. Trying to help the environment. No more snowmobilers. That means in a snowier environment, going into a grand solar minimum and a cooling period, stepping off of the longest interglacial we've ever had, you're not allowed to have any snowmobiles coming into a snowier climate, by the way. You're limiting the way for you to move around, your mobility.
Well, I'll tell you exactly why that, overall that they would want to do that. And, that kind of leads into the next topic about they're moving also to control the entire transportation industry. I'm sure if you fly anywhere, if you've been paying attention to that, they've been trying to totally destroy commercial flying. And it may be because they're getting ready to transition everyone over to completely automated public transportation, or if you want to have a private car, it'll be completely automated. You're not going to be able to drive that. If you do have a car that's gasoline powered, you'll have to pay some kind of special tax to be on the road, plus, special insurance because you're a human driver. And it looks like it's going that way. As a matter of fact, the FAA is approving limited flight tests for the SpaceX-backed company that's trying to fly cars right now. So we got this right here. FAA, excuse me, green, not the Future Farmers of America, but the, the FAA green lights limited flight operations for SpaceX-backed flying car. But then when you look over here, this article talking about digital currency could be used to block citizens from purchasing less desirable items, such as ammunition and maybe even gasoline-powered cars, because we don't want to ruin the environment. And then here, while they're telling everyone that the economies are great, for some reason, 8 of the central banks, as you well know, are stockpiling their gold supplies. I wonder why they're doing that, taking it out of the market. And then over here, also from Shift Gold, they're talking about the private sector recession, how, the government and everyone else is saying, we're doing good. But then at the same time, when you look at the actual environment of the workforce, there's not very many jobs available to people. And then on top of that, they have, robots filling positions now. And then also people that feel like they're maybe too valuable to work for 15 or around that amount an hour, which when I was a kid, that was great. $15 an hour, you could stock up some money pretty quick, even doing that. And then you got this climate change depopulation collapse plan to ban nitrogen. You've been harping on this too. Ban nitrogen and cripple farming because, obviously we don't want people growing food out there. And then just to rub it in the way that we're going here, Las Vegas lighting up a giant television screen, kind of like the Eye of Sauron. They've already been putting a giant eyeball in here. And these are all signs of the transition of our civilization going forward, where they're going to have a complete top-down control mechanism for all things. All finance, all purchasing powers, everywhere, anywhere you want to travel, you're going to have to use their system. And if you don't have the right, score on any of these systems, you're not going to be able to do anything. But in the meantime, who's going to control that super network of devices and stuff? China and the United States, I guess that's the main fight over here. Like I've been saying for a long time, it's kind of the Western powers against the communist capitalist society of China. And who's going to be controlling it? And China's saying, you know what, we're done exporting all our precious metals, which we did call that last year that was going to happen. And now they're saying we're no longer going to be outsourcing any of the rare earth elements that make our microchips, which makes all of the devices, even if you don't buy them directly from China. All of the other companies, like the Norwegian companies and Japanese companies, American companies, etc., use all of these Chinese chips. And if they don't use the chip itself, they are buying the rare earth elements to build it. So China kind of has the world by the sack as far as, any forward technological revelations will have to depend on China. And they have set it up to be a key figure in that. And, what is everybody else going to do? And this is all lining up to what I said. It's like a worldwide uncivil war that they're trying to set up. In every single country, there's some kind of major issue where the populace is getting polarized, and while they're getting ready and amped up to cut each other's throats, they're not preparing for a future against their real enemies, which is the mechanized government, or the age of the transhuman governments. And that's what we're seeing right now. That's what the World Economic Forum is all about. So they're just doing their game right now. A lot of this all predicted in the last, decade or so, and now they're doing it right in front of your face because their incremental program works perfectly. When you get used to a new idea, they're already implementing new ideas that they haven't even started telling you that they're doing. In the meantime, they use predictive programming through the media and entertainment to get you ready for the things that they lay out. And any number of things that were sci-fi just, I'm going to say even 5 years ago, are now implemented in the world you live in, all of the technologies. So who's going to run this? Well, he who has the rare earth elements are going to make the rules, kind of like the golden rule of he who has the gold makes the rules. That seems to be what we're boiling down to now, is the factions trying to figure out who is going to run this one world government. But in any case, they are implementing the program now. You can see it everywhere. And that's what I see from the United States. And like I said, if you're in France right now, I'm sure, the idea of civil war is on the minds of everyone there. They've been struggling for a while. And two ideologies are going to have to come to a head worldwide: free citizens or enslaved citizens. And it seems to be we're getting down to that black or white, on or off, choice that we have to make one or the other. I know which one I'm going for. I'm already in the process, and that's kind of what we talk about. Are you prepared to be self-sufficient while the world tears itself apart?
Yeah, pretty self-sufficient-ish. It's mind also. It's not just, it's more the mind. Can you break off the systems? Because you mentioned a good thing about, these corporations running today, they're the ones selling all the products, and they're the ones doing all, like you say, when you talked about all the packaging and all the plastics and all the logistics and all the movement and all the factories and all the mining and energy used in the process of just keeping business going to buy bits of junk from across the ocean, otherwise known as imports, or whatever we used to make in the United States, steel, aluminum, this sort of thing. Heavy aircraft, heavy industry, cars. I mean, just the plastics aspect of what you were talking about. And then, they make it like you, me, my neighbor. Oh, we're the ones who are warming the planet. Au contraire, mon frère. That was the companies, the corporations doing it. How can they blame you for the consumption that they're giving you 24 hours a day of advertising, print media, audio media, video? Buy, consume, get more. You got to buy this, buy two, one's on sale. Hey, it's the after July 4th sale. And it's just this constant consuming to get you to continue to use the debt to grow the system, and then they throw it back on you like you're the one to blame for something all these corporations are responsible for in reality. Why are the fingers never pointed at the corporations for causing all of the destruction to the planet? Because in reality, it's not me or you digging out the earth, mining rare earth minerals. Is it? Do you have a steam shovel, as they said back in the 1930s? I don't. I don't even have an antique one from the 1930s. I didn't dig. You know, you look at every single thing that's in your life, and you say, okay, did I get silica and refine that, and what kind of factory production for refined silica would there be? I mean, everything you look at across the landscape of what you own or where you live has come from a mega factory that used something to just vast amounts of energy and transportation to get that into the store somewhere where you bought it, but then you were convinced to buy it by all this advertising that runs across the airwaves nonstop, just annoyingly grinding. Yet, the reason I was trying to connect that somehow, you're the reason to blame, because I'm going to make a bold call here, Ransom. Bold call as it is. You're going to watch Antarctic sea ice become the next largest story. Now, take it for what it's worth. It's an indicator. And for me, this really spooks me, because any of you listened to our programs over the last few months, and Ransom, you could attest that I do talk about the Hunga Tonga eruption, the mesospheric ice crystal clouds in the upper layers of our atmosphere that ozone break down on. See, the Hunga Tonga eruption had this giant water vapor eruption that pushed up 170,000 feet. It was 98 to 130,000 feet just the first day or so after. It added 10% more moisture into our atmosphere in one single event. But that's not the astonishing part. The astonishing part is how much ice crystal blew up into the mesosphere. Like on an average year, you get some rockets that'll take off and will leave some smoke in the mesosphere, some particles. Well, a little meteorite will shoot in, it'll leave a trail, and you'll get something coming in the mesosphere. We're talking like 30 miles above our heads. 30 miles up. That's how high the water vapor went up in there. So generally, it's a very dry layer. There's very desert. They call it a desert layer for a reason. And then suddenly hundreds of thousands of times more ice crystals is up there right now, as we speak. So the amount of ozone getting broke down on that is tremendous, and it's going to be the largest ozone hole. But here's the thing. The UVB radiation is what's causing the Arctic or the Antarctic sea ice to melt. See, it started to melt into a low last year also. And then backtracking the research, if you look at the very lowest, or the lowest concentrations of ozone, which means the bigger the ozone hole is. So if you look at the years that have the biggest, most gigantic ozone hole, you will find the direct correlation of how much sea ice depletion there was in Antarctica for those years. So the lowest year that you would look at is like something like 2016 to the year 2000 was the lowest ever, with the correlation of how big the ozone hole was. So if you overlay those two data charts, this thing blows all of that so far off the scope of the chart. Again, it's like runaway sea ice depletion, but they're not telling you the real reason. It's because of the UVB radiation increases in the southern hemisphere that are melting the sea ice. And when I look at here, I almost shake my head and go, no, it can't be that fast and that big. Like, this is a crop destroying event that's ongoing and continuing to amplify in the southern hemisphere. It's the only way I can possibly describe it. You know, I did a report on this on the Opportunity Cycle report, which I produce. I talked about this mesospheric ice crystal cloud eruption back in January, and said that it's going to onset super fast as soon as, you know, it was already really above the normal averages of ozone depletion even in June. But to see this now verifying what was exactly predicted, that UVB would start hitting the oceans, and just like you put an ice cube in a microwave, it's going to melt way, way, way faster. But the drop off here is just, I mean, this is, southern hemisphere would struggle at best to produce food. Now, the crop that'll be affected most and first would be barley. Barley. So if you hear about anything, barley prices increasing, shortages of barley, some reason that there wouldn't be exports from nations for barley, anything barley. If you see barley prices, barley crop reductions, barley losses, anything related to barley and the harvest that goes way down, and there's like a shortage of it because there's not enough produced, that's a direct, you're into it. Barley is the most affected crop from UVB radiation. And the higher they find in the elevation that it grows is also a factor. But then barley's always grown at a little bit higher altitude. So the higher up on the mountainside you go, or on a plain or on a plateau or something, depending on how high it is, you're closer to the sun. So the UVB that strikes on those areas that are, at 3,000 feet or 4,000 feet compared to 1,000 foot in altitude is greatly different. Then a huge amount of the barley is grown at altitude. And you're going to have greater effects than it was at sea level. And then you see the ice already. This is astounding what we're seeing here. Mapping up these two data sets. Could it be underwater volcanoes? Could be. But there's just so much evidence pointing to the UVB striking the sea. Now, you got to also, and then think about in the conversations that I've seen from the past and heard right now in the present, insect life would be something that would be greatly affected too. Because the eyes would be blinded, the insects would be blinded, bird life. And humans aren't going to be able to stay outside as long either. They're going to have you're going to notice a lot of sunburns, a lot of like cataracts, many things. Remember when they used to talk about Australia and say, oh, you got to go out and lather up and put the thing on and you're going to, fry outside. You put your finger in the sun in Australia for like 2 seconds and it would burn off, just vaporize the bone, That kind of messaging of how intense the sun was, well, that's going to be like that plus. It's just kind of intense to look at this, but there are some natural things going on. Now, Ransom, how do you think that would, okay, I can make a direct call here. Barley losses, barley shortages, barley price increases because of this event in the Southern Hemisphere. So then how would the news media, do you think, run with this story, even though it's barley, which isn't a widely consumed commodity? But how can they run with that to cause panic in conjunction with the sea ice loss? And then I'll leave that question for you there.
They could just dissociate it with just the overall food market. Even the major beer manufacturers, I don't think are even really using barley anymore. They're using high fructose corn syrup with a beer flavoring. Like some of your people's favorite beers. They're not really barley anymore. So it makes you wonder if that's just something that they're willing to let go of. Because I'm looking at across the board, it seems like they're willing to just let things go that have been traditionally used for business and stuff. They're willing to crash certain markets. They don't care. They have all of these environmentally sensitive crops or, i.e. GMO food that Bill Gates talks about moving around from these. And if you remember, I don't know if it was last year or maybe a little further, I was talking about how I was reading this article that was talking about Bill Gates' interview in which he said that they would have to rotate crops out of areas in the Southern Hemisphere because of sun damage and flooding and climate change and all of these things. They have a lot of excuses to blame it on, but what they really want in the end is to be the sole source of nourishment for the masses, and they're almost there. If you really think about what they're doing to the food market, and you sent me one of those articles on Telegram there about our favorite Microsoft guy, and we've known for some time that, everybody's worried about the mosquitoes, but they're not worried about the lettuce. They're not worried about the carrots, tomatoes, etc. All of these things have, let's call it, extra additions to their genetic profile now. So they're little entities that are creating a certain substance for corporations. So they figured out how to change the food to be the controlling factor of what they want to happen for humankind. And I only see one way around that, and that's literally fast. If you don't have enough food for yourself, only eat the good foods. Because, I've been wondering if you just started living like, say, somebody that lived in the Neolithic period or something like that, when farming wasn't as widespread amongst people. They were hunting, they were gathering, but I believe they knew the plants of their time, and they would know where to go. And I think there was simple kind of farming, kind of like what I'm doing, which is just making different holes around in the earth and finding places to put seeds where the plant probably is going to like being there. But back then, you know, they were eating all of these different foods. No one could really control them at that time until society came, and, you know, we started having agriculture, and then became power to have armies based on these foods. Now we no longer need that. But food still is this deciding factor in controlling the human being. So, and we know from a point of view of health that your gut fauna and other things are like the source of your immune system, and that it gets out of whack and irregular if you're eating things that are not meant to be eaten by the human. So once your gut fauna is out of whack, you get all these, you know, symptoms, I guess, of malnutrition and a bad biotic equilibrium inside your body. And what do you think you're getting from these people that are designing things specifically to be made to affect you? The only way around these ideas, which is complete control of not just you, but your entire heredity, your entire genetic line forevermore, from now and to every kid that you have, every kid that they have. That's literally what they're doing right now. And I think people are in a naive trance-like state right now, where they have everybody worried about things that really in the end will not matter. Because basically they're polluting the genetic. It's like a Noah story. We're waiting for the big flood, but the big flood ain't going to be a giant flood that floods the world. It's just going to be a changeover of the either survivors that figured out how to not eat their food, or the ones that ate it and became something else, which I think is going to be a cradle to grave human being that has to meter their life because they have all these ailments that they need medications to regulate. And I don't live that way. I mean, I can't even imagine living that way. And that's how they have everybody in control right now. And then comes the problems, the manufactured problems of grid downs, failures, just, blaming war for supply chain, because what they're doing is they're redesigning the map right now. And when that happens, obviously you're going to have issues getting things that you normally got in the way that you did before. They want to be the only source for your foods. And that's what they've, I'm sure you're familiar with what they've done to a lot of African countries, where they've sold them crop seeds that do not reproduce, and they have to get it back from them. And they do that in the U.S. too. So this is their ultimate goal, is to own every single bit of source of nutrition and life source of the people. That's an obvious targeted agenda that's going along side by side with the Great Reset. And that's why they're targeting not only the air we breathe and labeling plant food a poison, but also the, things that we put into the earth to make the food grow better, like the nitrogen, all these things. They're shutting down human behavior in the only way that human beings have ever done well, which is through agriculture. But they want to be the source of all this stuff, but they're not selling you grandma's carrots and heirloom stuff. They're giving you a concoction of lab created, designed things that are made to do a specific thing to you. And that's not a conspiracy theory. You can go listen to these people tell you themselves what their plans are.
Yeah, that's why you should only buy heirloom seeds. Focus on those heirloom seeds. If you go to the Amish, they also have seeds that you can buy. Look at the fruits and vegetables on that is for sale on the shelves there. If you take those and then you save the seeds and dry them out, you can just replant those same seeds, because almost all that stuff that the Amish are selling, at least down here in Tennessee, is heirloom. It's open pollinated. Just boom, put it back in the ground next year in a pot. Even right now, it's still got some time left in the summer. It'll grow another one right away. So those are the kind of things you want, that you could pass a half a pumpkin or half a watermelon or half of whatever to somebody, and it will grow again. Half a sweet potato, whatever, put it back in, it'll pop out some leaf, and you can eat the leaf as a green vegetable, a stir-fry vegetable, as you're waiting for the potatoes to ripen underground. I mean, okra's all over the place. You just need like one little, ear of okra or piece of okra, or whatever you like call it. Let those seeds dry out. It could be a fresh one and just let it dry. You get those round, grayish seeds that'll pop out. Throw those in the soil. You got okra next year. But seed saving is going to be a skill to have too. You look at all these things, the world's changing. Getting good seeds that are open pollinator. Replant the following year. Then you can replant indefinitely as long as you save the seeds from each season's crop forever for free. That's what they want to stop. We have free food on the planet. You know how to grow it. They want to stop that too.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
And welcome back to the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne, right here along with Ransom Godwin, talking about how the world might shift and bend. Now, during the break, somebody going by the name of Shape-Shifting Eel asked me, tell me something interesting to start the program for the second hour. Okay, Shape-Shifting Eel, I will. NASA, tired of numerous requests to show the original lunar landing tapes, said it had lost them, all 700 boxes. And I thought that's super interesting. But nope, it goes even on any further. They lost all the lunar soil, almost 300 kilograms, which is well over 600 pounds. And now they are begging countries for several grams of samples from other countries. Now wait, what happened to all those rocks that were on display in the museums as well? You know, there's all these lunar rocks when I was a kid, and when you saw them everywhere. Okay, so they lost all the rocks, and they lost all the lunar dust. And they lost all the 700 boxes. Okay, so that was my interesting thing to start the program. So, Ransom, take it over from here.
I wanted to talk about the. Did you see the clip of the lady freaking out on the airline that she thought somebody might be not real or maybe even a reptilian angel, alien? Yeah, and you remember we were kind of talking about that last week as we kind of move into this new phase, whether it's electromagnetic or it's just, mass hysteria or just a sense of the worldwide cabin fever of human beings realizing that, they can't go anywhere. This is the place we have to be. This is the Garden of Eden. This is where we're supposed to spread out and cultivate and take care of our planet and use it to live off of, so we could have meaningful lives and have time to think up and invent things. And instead, we're on the, what as we call it, the metered system. They're metering everything, and basically, if you really want to navigate our time today, all you have to do is figure out how to avoid being caught getting around the meter system. So, like, if the government knows you're growing food and you don't go grocery shopping and you got, you're off the grid and you're producing your own electricity and, you feel like maybe you shouldn't have to deal with some of the rules that your government makes that really shouldn't apply to you as a free human being, then you have to watch out, because they're going to be coming for you. So, like, for example, America's kind of like those kids that used to try to sneak into the movie theater in the back door. Except for now, you're not going to get a punishment. They're going to. I mean, you're not going to get a warning. They're going to really punish you, and that's the way the system is. If they find out that you've got around their metering, they're going to take you out. And that goes to the biggest levels, like, Gaddafi or Gaddafi or whatever, talking about making his own gold and silver, and maybe JFK, insinuating that maybe the Treasury should make silverback currency, and making executive orders and making moves to get around the metering system. You find out that they grassy knoll you, or they let loose ISIS on you, or whatever they're going to do. So basically, that's what they're doing, is finding all the loopholes where human beings can get around their metering system, and destroying it. So that's why they're trying to outlaw farming and, make it hard to travel, make it expensive to live or to do things on your own. And if you really think about that, you could go out right now and buy acres of land probably somewhere that doesn't really have a water source on it. And, it's cheap. It's real cheap. You could just get out there and be by yourself and do whatever you want. Because they know you can't do nothing on that. Now, if you get somewhere where there's water, the price it just skyrockets. But you could still get relatively cheap land as long as there's nothing on it. But as soon as you start putting stuff on it, all of these people show up wanting, they want their permits and their payments for, oh, you got a house? Oh, well, your property tax used to be only a couple $100, but here's you a check, a bill for thousands of dollars now. So now you got to come up with revenue just to exist on the land that you have. And the bigger the land and the better the land and the better the stuff that you build on there trying to get off grid, the more the property tax goes up and the more payment of rent they're going to want. And it's like that on all levels. And they don't want you to realize that. That's why they're pulling this thing that's, I don't know what to call it. It's like a TV show, basically the politics of the world. You know, if you watch the I forgot what her name is over there in France, threw a big old nice speech that sounded really good. And at the same time, knowing that her government's just going to ignore that and they're going to keep doing what they've been doing, which is a weird, you know, you're not allowed to say what it really is, but what they're doing is they're destroying Europe. They're destroying the Western world because they have to get rid of that for the new empire. And this is the classic, you know, phase. Even if you look at that, those big bar graphs of the history of the glacial and interglacial periods and the solar cycle, and you see those spots right there where civilization stops and starts back up, and we're at one of those spots, in my opinion. I think that's what's going on, and they're just writing it out, trying to plan it this time, and that's why they're pushing all of these, you know, catalysts for things to just destroy themselves. And you know, if you've been paying attention to the U.S. Mexican border, there is some crazy stuff going on. For the last year, it's been turning increasingly like a militarized combat zone. And, you know, we're seeing stuff that got sent overseas for Ukraine showing up in Mexico. Crazy stuff like today there was cut bodies strewn around Mexico City from one cartel. I don't know which one it was, but they were trying to send a message that things are fracturing. And if you know what's going on in Mexico, you know that the cartels are heavily tied into don't worry about the drugs and stuff, because the drugs are kind of, you know, they're another way to destroy society, but it's a slower process and the victims do it to themselves for the most part. But the cartels are updating their business plan. They're now getting into food and finance, crypto, and other things like that. So they're updating, and the same can be said about all of the black markets around the world. So not only is the, you know, top level of governments changing over to this totalitarian one world model, which I think has already taken over, because I don't understand why I saw every country in the world, enemies, friends alike, do the exact same thing when we had a pandemic go around the world. For some reason, every single country, you know, every one of them, they all knew what to do, when to do it, and in unison, they all did it. So that was an indicator to me that there already is people in position in every single country in the world ready to, you know, fulfill their role in this new world order. And the new world order is their great reset. That's what it's for. That's what they built it for, is for this reset. Now they're pulling the plug on it. And, you know, there was a story I saw a minute ago that was talking about how Putin was faking blowing up the nuclear reactor. You notice the amount of predictive programming that there's been, and we've talked about it a lot, about that entire zone in Eastern Europe being turned into some kind of nuclear accident, whether it's going to be nuclear weapons or they're just going to, you know, outright make a couple of them go critical. But they're trying their darndest for the last couple of years to destroy them and mess them up. They collapsed a bridge and flooded one of them. They've had firefights at them, and you know, so they've totally program the entire population in that area to get ready for a Chernobyl-like event. And that will devastate the food market worldwide, because, you know, a lot of people don't realize if one sector in this global franchise that they have goes down, it's a domino effect where people have to start reshipping things. And we've seen in the last 2 years that countries are now starting to save the majority of their own you know, produce for themselves, which is basically smart. But that's going to cause more of this global versus nationalist government thing. So what I think they're doing now is we're in the worldwide uncivil war phase, where they're trying to spark some kind of disagreement or disturbance in every single country in the world so that they need someone to come save them. And that's the World Economic Forum and the New World Order. That's what they're putting right in our faces. But I think China's going to pull a wild card because they want to be the one that runs that. And I think they're in a good position now with enough backers in the United States and some of the other Western countries to pull it off.
Yeah, you were asking before, what are we all thinking of at the moment? Well, the temple in Cambodia with the bas relief of a stegosaurus. You know, now how do these two particular things meet in the middle? The global civilization times prior that collapsed. Unanimous, using the same technology, the same types of artistic and also architectural techniques across the globe in unison. Perhaps they never really left. Even after these natural cataclysms rolled in, they were still able to retain power. How would they do that? They'll control the finance and the technology. And it does seem that if it wasn't one global order before, we're talking prior reset, then the holdovers from that would have the best technology, that because they would have had continuity government preparedness even back then for the last reset or the last great cataclysm. If we're doing it now, don't you think persons of the last cataclysm would have said, hey, we got all these inbound signals to the best of our ability with the amount of money we have in the manpower or whatever, let's just set some stuff aside so we, all the elite and rich, can ride it out. What do you think they would have brought in? Well, the gold, for sure. The gold would have been one of the things brought in. And now we see all these central banks pulling all the gold in. And all these people suddenly just disappearing. Like we talked about, all, you know, how many politicians have dropped out. Famous movie stars, bye-bye. Perhaps it's because of 2024. Now, why are all these countries acting in unison as they would have in a prior cataclysm reset before that time? Now, did they know the Younger Dryas was inbound? Did they see that, comet streaking through the skies for how many months before it came in and hit the ice sheet over Canada and caused that massive reduction and dropped back into an ice age instantly? I mean, how long ago did they see that? You would have had to seen that comet coming before it reached perihelion and then swung around and then bam, hit the Earth. I mean, there would have been some advanced warning. Months. But what are they all able to run together with? So at least in the predictions that I have along with others here, the four gas giants are going to come together. And this is a new piece of information that I was talking to somebody just last night and it blew my mind wide open. Because he's from Poland and he's 80 this year from Poland, and he was telling me about how they, back then, the things that they're seeing happen here now are very reminiscent of what Poland was like, or it turned into during the Soviet era occupation, whatever you want to call it, behind the wall. But the four gas giants creating their own magnetic field, slightly interlooping. It's a second magnetic field. It's not going to be super gigantic by any means. It's going to be a small magnetic field of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, interplaying with each other's magnetic fields over those millions of miles between each other. But it's going to be the closest they're going to be in a square since the year 79 AD. That's a fact. It's where the planets sit in their orbits. I mean, there's a cycle in that too. So to go back to this particular cycle, the closest that these four gas giants in our outer solar system can get will be in October of 2024. Now they're going to create like I say, a second slight magnetic field. But, I was only originally looking at the Earth is going to swing through the sun's magnetic field connected to that magnetic field in the outer solar system. We're going to swing through that looping toroid field of magnetism for just a few seconds or a few minutes. And it'll have some effect on our planet. You know what I never thought of, that my mind got blown wide open last night, is if the moon has this much effect on our tides, what's going to happen when that thing starts really getting amplified and having its own magnetic field as a second magnetic field, tugging on the Earth when we get closer to it? And like I said, what if the tides doubled in height? Around the world, the entire world's tides doubled. Like, how much damage would that be? Now, what happens if the world's global tides were up 10x higher than they normally would be? Then you got to think, a doubling of the tide, the huge amounts underwater. So what if you have the moon going full at the high tide of like the king tide of a year on a full moon, but then we have the second magnetic field in the outer solar system at the same time overlooping and powering that system itself to amplify everything on the planet. Yeah, man, that could be a very good reason why all these countries are working so quickly in unison. And the deflection for me is this, okay, I understand central bank digital currencies are coming in. I get it. It's going to be a means of control, maybe, because the tech might not even survive that long, because as we come in, it looks like there is a complete pull all the valuables behind and we're battening down the hatches kind of thing happening right now. But at the whole time, they need you distracted in any way, shape, or form possible. Well, all the real goods get pulled back to other places. You notice everywhere in the world's talking about disconnecting from everywhere else? Yeah, the BRICS might form over here, but what it's mainly about. The formation, they keep telling you, is going to take longer and longer and longer to get all these, unified currency backed by natural resources or backed by gold or some type of asset, natural asset that it can be traded amongst each other one for one, or it can be, settled in gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange in an instant fashion. No longer waiting 3 days, but like really instantaneous settlement in gold converted to your currency of choice. 50% of the world's going to, 60% of the global, businesses and countries are going to jump on that system. But they say it's going to take a minute to do that. But between where we sit now and where we're going there, what are you seeing? The same thing. The disconnect and everybody running with the resources. Now, the proposal is like they're going to try to get all this gold to try to get ready for this new finance system. Yeah, or is it really? Or is it the siphoning of the art and the valuables, the treasures, and pulling them back into countries to those areas that they had already set up for continuity of society? I'm not even going to call it continuity. It's way beyond that. It's continuity of civilization outposts. Are we at that point already? Because the amount of gold, if you don't have the precious metals now, you're going to order them online or you're not going to get them. I mean, you go to physical stores, they want to gouge your eyeballs out to get an ounce of anything. And once the run starts and, people realize, we got to go get some of this stuff called silver, it's all going to be gone. I was reading some news articles, business article, and they were saying that the amount that's on the COMEX that stands for delivery in August, because of the demand from solar panels, they won't be able to meet the actual physical demand and they'll have to settle in cash, meaning that there won't be enough silver for everybody who wants it in August off the COMEX, which is a huge buyers anyway. They're buying like those 1,000-ounce bars. So anyway, do you think, Ransom, it could be a reason that the world's governments are getting together? I was just focused on the magnetic field. What if it's the tides? What if it's the jet streams? The cloud cells are going to start just moving so dramatically because the Amsterdam had its strongest storm ever recorded in Amsterdam. Now, again, I got to go back because the 1700s had some really strong winds. In the 1600s, remember, it was that story that the English fleet was sailing through there because they'd conquered. I forget where they conquered. You're a better historian than I at that exact time. But the British fleet had all their cannons pointed one direction, and a windstorm blew in and sunk the entire fleet in there because they were lopsided. They had all the cannons open on one side. Now that's an immense windstorm. Now they're saying that this is the strongest windstorm ever, but I would contest and say in history, in the recent 400 years or so, there's been way stronger winds or equally as strong. So that's with a grain of salt that I say that, but you should see all the trees that got uprooted and everything, because those trees are less than 100 years old or at 100. There's no 400-year-old trees or 500-year-old trees standing in the Netherlands. So almost everything blew down. A lot of tall trees blew down. Yeah, but, it's a 100-year-old tree, big whoop. I want to see a 500-year-old tree felled in the wind. But you can see something big this way comes, and I think the distraction factor is at about 11.5 right now. So where do you think we sit?
It just seems to be all going on in the background while everybody's, worried about which political party is running, or who's doing what. You notice it's a cartoon thing, and it's so easily predictable, because I knew like 4 years ago they were going to pull the DeSantis, what's the guy in Newsom thing, as try to push them off as the two new guys. And if you've been watching the news, they're kind of throwing Kamala under the bus by saying, only certain people were around where that cocaine was found. It's over there by Kamala. Don't worry about the known Parmesan cheese enjoyer that was, sweating profusely and snorting on his nose there. And it seems like they're just doing that on purpose. It seems like they let that diary out. It seems like they let the laptop out. It seems like an on-person psyop to let the populace feel like things are falling apart. I mean, think about the idea of that. And there's several articles out now, news agencies trying to convince people, is it time to change the national anthem? Why are Americans losing faith in United States institutions? Well, maybe it's because that's by design, whatever you see. I watched this video the other day of the Texas DPS put razor wire along the border and on the Rio Grande. And then, sometime later, the Border Patrol comes along and cuts it and lets everybody in. So it's like they're already setting up these divisive ideas that they pump everybody up about. Meanwhile, in the background, they're getting everything set up because no one's paying attention to those things. They're not paying attention to the amount of farmland that's being purchased. They're not paying attention to the amount of families that no longer own their homes. But instead, banks and corporations are buying up those properties. Private property is going to be something that is very hard to come by as time goes by. And then you can imagine if the economy gets really bad, that people might start selling their properties off just to survive, which unfortunately puts only people with income that they've saved up in the spot to buy all of that. So we're getting ready for a massive redistribution of not only land, but the wealth. And I'm waiting for the laws, because you see how they're attacking it on a country level by trying to ban different things that industrial farmers use, or even smaller farmers use. And they'll get to the point where they're making laws about how it's unsafe to eat food you've grown yourself. And mark my words, that's one of my predictions you're going to see in the next year, is attacks on gardening and attacks on the idea that you could eat your own food. Because I increasingly seeing articles, basically saying that people are dumb for trying to figure out things on their own or doing their own research. Because you remember, doing your own research is bad. And all of the news media have told us that at one point or another, especially in the last couple of years. It turns out doing our research worked out for a lot of us. I'm not worried about any specific conditions that are going around. And now that some of those things are coming to light, maybe other people will start taking seriously maybe their food supply. Because you watch how fast things change. I mean, imagine if you lived and you just bought some property somewhere in like Ukraine or something 10 years ago, and you're thinking, wow, this is nice, this is cheap, it's a first world nation, they have universities, everything's cool. And then next thing you know, the city is flattened. I mean, and that's where they're at right now. So that just proves in a moment's notice that things can go and turn upside down on its head. And look at across the U.S. year by year. I can't remember a single year in my memory where on the news media they didn't show some tornado, hurricane, earthquake, etc. totally devastate people. And it seems like it's not to cover the news or current events. It's more like they want people to realize what it's like to suffer, and that's what they're pushing. And if you've noticed, you can't even watch. I mean, there's no new ideas in television or movies now. They're all regurgitations of the same ideas. And the overwhelming theme of all of that is that we're changing over into a new civilization run by robotics, AI, and a totalitarian government state. I mean, can you name me one movie where we go up into space and we find some aliens? It's a really good, and they're saying, oh look, humans will spread out and do good now. It's always something bad. They're always going to eat us, kill us, or something. It's how to cook humans cookbook there. I mean, they've been pressing this idea for a long time. And I've noticed that, they keep wetting their foot in the water to see if people are ready or not to accept it. And I just saw a dragon of like 1,000 drones fly over China. And it was pretty cool. Now, it was a cartoonish design, but I could totally see how they could make that into something really realistic. Imagine if Quetzalcoatl flies over Mexico, or Jesus flies over the Middle East, or the prophet, what's his name that I'm not allowed to say, or people will get mad at me. Any one of these things, I think they're about to come up with it and really start messing with their heads, and it may come have something to do with what you're talking about this massive change in magnetic field that human beings are about to experience. If you knew the precise technology or scenario to really manipulate people in that kind of circumstance, wouldn't you be ready to go or looking forward to that point to go ahead and start doing programs that have to do with that? And have they not been practicing on us for a long time? I mean, there's voice to skull. They've admitted that they can use, directional sound to penetrate someone's head and make them hear things. So we know all these technologies exist, but what happens when nature allows them to take it to the next level?
Or riding on top of nature. So this cycle is going to be as intense as it will be. Level 1, for example. Well, it's only going to reach that maximum level. Now, imagine if you had technologies to amplify that. Well, you could get level 2 out of that. Although I think the natural cycle would be more intense than the technologies we have to amplify it. So maybe it's a 0.5. But anyway, the cycle would be, to the observer, 1.5 times stronger. If nature was one full cycle at full amplitude at 1, and human inventions could amplify that a little bit, piggyback on top of it, right on top of it, 1.5. So if you knew the timing of the intensification of the magnetic field, the onset, we've already determined the onset was around 2020. Like Valentina Zarkova did a huge amount of work, and John Casey, Pierce Corbin, there's a lot of people out there that did research on this and showed that and proved that right around that time, the onset was starting of this grand solar minimum. It's here now. It's clearly more than just what they would call the little ice age. Eventually that cold will come. Now, will it be here right this year? Possibly. It seems like things are way off and winter is coming inbound early, along with those record snows from last year. The late outset of winter into spring. They didn't talk about this either too much in the news. Remember how long it seemed winter just drug out last year before we got into spring? Like that was a long winter. It kept going and going and going, even here in East Tennessee. And everywhere else that had record snowfall, do you think that snow's going to melt and everything's going to be crispy clean and green by, no way. It's a month past that. Nobody ever, how quickly people forget with the goldfish memory of having one of the longest winters in a very long time. And I might add, I wrote a note when you were talking, and it's just discombobulated and it didn't make sense. But we went shopping in Home Depot today, and the way you said the life cost is it's ridiculously, prohibitively, just absurdly expensive for even the smallest of things. Spend $300 on things that we just need to build a turkey coop and fix some things on some gates and, just simple stuff. I got one gutter that I need to fix, gutter screws. I mean, just things you're looking at, how can it all be that expensive? But again, you're doing things, you're repairing things, getting, a lot of more self-sufficient or resiliency in place. And I can't, I just really am baffled at how much things cost Even going to buy some feed or something for animals, you know, it's $18.99 a bag now for 12% horse feed. Those things used to be like $10. I mean, the amount to keep yourself self-sufficient, and then, you know, the animal husbandry and the different kind of feed that you're going to need, for chicken feed, or if you need meat bird feed with like, I don't know, 22, 24% protein. And you got the 12% if you're going to have some sheep or goats, that sort of thing when they're younger. Now it's cool now because you can cut grass and you can scythe a bunch of grass, or you can run a bunch of grass through a bush hog or I don't know, some kind of mower and deliver it to your animals right now because it's plentiful greenery around, like tons. What happens when it comes into winter? Like to feed those animals, holy smokes, how expensive is that going to be? A, they're going to need to burn more calorie, and B, unless you got, you know, rolls and rolls and rolls of hay. And that's really expensive too. In some places, like $200 for a round bale of hay. Here, luckily, it's only $35. But still, if you're going to keep a bunch of sheep through the winter, you're probably going to need 10, at least of those. You're looking at $400 or $500 just for hay to keep your animals alive through the winter. In addition to the feed, because they just can't eat hay. That fills them up. That's like bread. Well, you got to give them something else. They need some steak in there, some meatiness to fill them up. I mean, you could have a greenhouse and try to grow your own, something that grows super fast that there's plentiful leaf of, that can still give a lot of veg and thing too. I don't know, that's one to think about, like how many square feet does a greenhouse have to be to grow enough green foliage to add into the hay so it's not so dry, and then to cut that feed cost. See, that's where, you know, if they make things prohibitively expensive for people to get off systems, then raising the price on the animal feed would be one of the way to do it. Because it'd be difficult to produce your own unless you're really, that's your focus, then you could do it. But if it's just like in your routine, it's like just splattered in the day somewhere, and it's not your main focus to preserve food for your animals, then that's like your main focus not preserving food for yourself too. You're going to want to provide for those animals because systems do break down. If you have the birds, you can still get eggs. Sometimes you can get chicks if you let the eggs go and you let some of the hens roost on it or whatnot. You can get some free chickens out of that. But otherwise, if supermarkets shut down or systems break down or whatever, at least you'd have a meat source for a year or so if nobody came in and stole it, and you'd have something you could trade with. But you got to keep your animals alive. So I guess I was going with that, and I had a list here that popped in my mind when you were talking about how expensive things were getting, and you know, they trying to get you back on systems when everything in life is metered. So if you're going to think about in order of importance of things that Ransom was mentioning, is you're going to have to know how to grow the food first. Then, and secondly, you're going to have to know how to save the seeds so you can grow the food again without having to buy the seeds. And see, before we got on the break, I was like, irked me because, you know, all those seeds used to, in my grandparents' time, like everything was, you just saved the seed and you could replant it. So nobody had to buy seeds or food, really. Everybody, 40% of the people grew their own food. So supermarket was kind of a, you know, it was there for the lard and things you didn't want to do yourself, like render down a pig, you know, just things that you couldn't get. Like you couldn't generally make a light bulb at your house, but you could go get one. Most people grew a lot of stuff. So saving the seed would be the next thing. And then you're going to have to store the foods that you get. So canning, preserving. And then another one would be animal husbandry. Like how do you keep chickens, pigs, sheep, goats, whatever you're going to keep. So people are getting ready and they want to get, if you get off the system, now again, the question I was trying to bring all these things up. So even if you had all that, like how much deeper is the reduction of the system going to be? Because if you had, you know, a few sheep, a couple goats, you had some turkeys, you had a couple chickens, whatever, that would supply you through like a year's worth of meat. And then if you kept a bunch of chickens alive, you could have egg source too. But at the end of that year plus, then what happens? You have to start thinking about breeding your animals then to have them continually produce, like you would have pollinator seeds, open pollinator seeds. Well, you'd want to think about having all your animals to reproduce through the years. Yeah, but farming it takes a lot of time. It's really not, it's you can have some sore muscles and things. But how Ransom, so my question, I guess, is how off the system is it going to keep going and going? And those people who learn how to stay out of the system eventually will just disconnect from it, or they're going to be roped back into it forcefully.
I think we're going to have it's a question of camouflage. Obviously, if you depart too far from the system, people come to find out why. But like if you're just doing it kind of right in front of everyone's face, like I've been working on this small piece of land, and not hard work or nothing. Like I've been growing stuff. So here's a good example. I had one amaranth plant last year in this bed that I made, and I grew all kinds of stuff in there, other peppers, melons, other stuff that grew out of there. And this year, when I was short on soil, I recycled that soil, right? So we dug trenches, we dug holes, we did everything. So now I have like 40 amaranth plants growing, the purple amaranth, that I did not plant. It's just from the seeds moving around in the soil. And then when I reuse the soil, and like an entire forest this year of lamb's quarter. This is something that I did not plant. But because I planted, other stuff or let it grow and let the seeds blow around, the abundance just multiplies itself. And it looks like it's, decorative. So nobody's going to even notice. They're just going to go, oh, wow, that's pretty. But if everybody kind of did that with all of their land all of the time, can you imagine how much food would just be growing everywhere where people didn't even plan on growing it? Because this was like a really cool experiment this year that I didn't even plan on doing, which was just recycling the soil. And everywhere I used that soil, which was in several different places, I have amaranth and lamb's quarter and some other stuff that just popped up in there because of the amount of seed that I didn't get. And I thought I had harvested and collected almost all of that seed, but there was enough mixed in the soil where there is that plant everywhere. So obviously this year it's going to seed everywhere again, and then it's just going to be everywhere. I imagine it'll start growing in other people's yards. And it's amazing to me why it's not already like that. How come, just from my own experience, I'm seeing that just doing a little bit of farming, what I call minimal effort farming, I'm just getting results that, like, outside I have a big bag of purple okra from one plant with like thousands of seeds in it. So even if you're not even growing the food right now, you can grow wealth just by growing seeds and filling up jars full of it. And each time you grow in your area, from my understanding of it, each generation of that plant that you successfully grow becomes more and more adapted to the environment that you grew it in. So it, adapts right to, so here there's very little moisture. There's a lot of sun. And you were talking about that earlier. I believe that there's a way to actually find out without listening to anyone else how bad the sun is at any given time. So right now we're having a geomagnetic storm. I think I don't know. I forgot the size of the flare that went off on the 4th of July or Independence Day the other day. But the ants, I have these large colony of rough harvester ants that live in New Mexico. Very painful sting. And everybody thinks that we're crazy for having them in our yard because everybody else poisons them or gets rid of them. But they get rid of the gophers. The gophers don't dare dig tunnels into my yard where I'm growing all my vegetables. And not only that, they really do harvest. So what they do is they go around into your garden after you've planted, and they take out all of the dead seeds that weren't going to do anything, and they take it back to their house. But they leave the seeds that are growing green out of it, and they don't mess with the plant anyway. And they're very peaceful, harmonious animals. So like if you just do your thing and they do their thing, they'll never bite you. You have to be aggressive with them to even get them to be aggressive, and you'll regret it when that happens. But it's just like a natural thing that's there, that humans do everything that they can now in our society to do the opposite of what's good for the environment and their self. And that's what we're trying to all relearn and go back that way. So I don't think that we're going to be able to break off and make a little civilization out on the side and be left alone by any government. That is never going to happen. Instead, we're going to have to camouflage. And, like I've talked about before, is develop these little inner circles, kind of like secret societies, where we teach each other tricks that we learned and do this stuff on the side until maybe we win over more of the populace to realize that common sense works better than fiction. And that listening to people that peddle fiction, like the climate alarmists, or you can pick the topic, I guess, but there's always these alarmists and propagandists that twist and contort all the information, and they don't want you to find out about things on your own. They don't want you to learn about things on your own. But it doesn't take much but regular human activity to learn most of these things. So even my 2-year-old daughter already knows multiple plants in my yard, which it sounds dangerous, but she recognized them. She knows what a spinach is. She knows what the lamb's quarter is. She knows what the onions are, and she knows which ones she can already pick and eat. And I know that I'm never going to go starving, even if I have to live in the wilderness. There's just abundance everywhere if you know how to use it, unless we're going through a tumultuous time that the sun or some object does to us, or even volcanism, and we can't control those things. So we might as well plan for things that we can control, which is seed saving. And if you think about that, we wouldn't have any of the food that we have if it wasn't for smart people in the ancient past all the way up to the more recent past that have been saving the seeds. Just like you said, I have jars and jars of seeds around now, an abundance of it. One melon makes, I don't know how many, at least 1,000 seeds inside of there. If not 1,000, several hundred. And, each one of those, you can just scoop it out, and they've trained everyone to throw all this stuff away. So, if you don't even have seeds, and you go to the store and you buy organic food, and you like organic food, you can save all this stuff from there. Now, some of it's been irradiated, but if it grows, it's a free investment into producing food. So we never throw away seeds. They either get thrown outside to where nature can find a spot for them, or we're saving them. And that's even from the food that we're buying from the stores. And, one day you're going to have to stop buying the food from the stores, because it'll no longer be food, like totally. It'll be medication.
Scary. That'll definitely divide the world. Now, speaking of growing food, it takes a huge combination of factors of rainfall and how many days it's cold in the soil, how many days of sunshine it gets. So, it can't sit in soggy soils. It's like a gift of life that needs to be really nurtured for it to grow. It's just the fact that we're able to grow with such precision at the volumes we do today globally. So they're bringing in, 100 million tons of crops, these kind of things, grains. And so that well timed and that known of, we plant on this date and we harvest in this date, depending on the region that you're at. Region 3, Region 7, Region 10, whatever. But I find it fascinating and unusual that the Weather Network puts this story out. How a volcano half a world away once stole Canada's summer. Now, why in the world is this article coming out from the Weather Network? They talk about the 1816 year without a summer after the 1815 Tambora eruption on the equator in Indonesia. Now, what is it that they're trying to tell you? That, wait a second, a volcano half a world away. Let me see. Where's Tonga? Where's Shiveluch in Russia? It's half a world away. They're telling you something between the lines in this article here. And then they talk about, after the sheer force from the blast, the summer was noticeably shorter afterward. It's written in like a 5th grade level for you to understand it. But maybe that's the way most people understand. I like a little more deeper reading, a little more fact in it, so I could backtrack, maybe a source or two, so I could check back if I want to do my own information searching. But what is it about? And then here there's a quote: "And Upper Canada would take a bad hit the following year. Bouts of frost and crop disease late into 1817, which would be if the Hungatonga eruption was in 2021, you add a whole year, because it takes a year for it to even get into its flow to disrupt. Remember, it's half a world away. So already talking into Q1 of 2022, that'd be 1816. So if we were going to go, what the equivalent would be 1817 is right now. And isn't it interesting that all these fires are happening in Canada, and then they're using all the excuse from all the smoke to say that the temperatures are now dropping, and there's some sun blocking that's making cooler temperatures in Canada where the wildfires are because of the smoke. But they're talking about the same thing here in this article about Upper Canada taking hits with frost and crop disease. I'm wondering if, well, they're going to blame orange smoke on all the crop diseases. Before, a lot of people thought it was, well, that was directed toward people. But what if it's directed toward crops? That would be in its own way directed toward people. And if you knew which kind of aerial compounds could almost be like fumigation and then land on the crops at whatever density, and then it could stunt the growth or just kill the plants, stop pollination, stop fruit production, stop, any of the synthesis of carbohydrates into complex sugars, whatever the disruption of the DNA, whatever plant it would be, you could disrupt it in certain. That's what herbicides do. They disrupt that function. They'll stop chlorophyll production, for example. That's what the chemical does. It doesn't really kill the plant. It stops the chlorophyll production in the plant. And then if they can't produce chlorophyll, it's like you can't produce any blood, any new blood. So you have to look at them and wonder what was in that smoke.
And what if they did that to us?
Yeah.
Like our vitamin D production. I mean, you said that, it just almost sounded like something that they'd be doing to us at the same time. And you sent me that article about the skin cancer thing, and that just tied a loop there. Like you imagine if they're doing that to plants, or that's possible to be done to plants, is that possible to do the same thing to humans? I didn't mean to interrupt there. I actually thought I was muted.
No, that's a great point, though. What if it is? Well, what if it's for both, or one more than the? What if it's a heavier weight toward the plants? Like if you have 100% of that effect, 75% of the effect would be, at the plant of the total effect, and 25% would be human effect. I was just adding on to your thought. Continue, Ransom. I'm trying to digest, because whatever you're going to say is going to dovetail into this. So keep going with the thoughts, because I want to try to see how these connect here with what you were talking, people and plant.
Well, don't you think it's kind of funny that they got to practice 2 years worth of telling everybody to stay inside, and they did not tell people to take zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin B, etc. They did not tell people to do that. That's not something that was told to people, even though that we know that was probably the best thing for you to do. But just think about the whole idea of them locking or the majority of the world being cramped into their homes and different things. And then following that, when we come out of it, you have this Hungatonga thing. And, in any various, I think one just went off, another volcano just went off today. It's like there's one constantly. But can you imagine the cumulative effect, in which there's already people that have problems with this, that move from equatorial regions up into Canada and Northern Europe, where they have no vitamin D production in their skin already? Can you imagine that these guys that, like Biden, Bill Gates, et cetera, they want to spray stuff in the air, and they want to, do these things that really won't change the function of the planet, but it might do specific things that people aren't thinking about. Maybe like just alter the amount of the right sun rays that come in that produce vitamin D in our skin, the right UV, light. And if you look into some of these skincare products that are supposed to protect you from the sun, if you notice, there's two different kinds of UV, right? There's two different kinds. One damages our skin and one produces vitamin D. Now, I'll leave it up to the audiences there to go look up which exact UVs are being blocked and what they do. Because, if you just think about that, the whole idea of the way they're driving society is that the sun is bad, that the world's burning up. You don't want to be outside. You need to stay inside. We need to be filtered. We need to be masked. We need to be, put on our leashes, basically. And they're getting everyone ready for this Pavlov training of society for this great reset, where people may be literally scared to go outside. And they may use actual real science to back this up, because the last time the magnetic field was like this, or maybe not the last time, but one of the times it was like it is now, is about 40,000 years ago, about the time of Neanderthals' disappearance. They just disappeared. Now, one theory, there's some papers out there that talk about how the Neanderthal did not carry a certain gene that Cro-Magnon carried, and that gene may have just been why we're around and they're not, and that would be protection from cosmic rays and the production of vitamin D in our skin. Being able to change shades instead of being locked into only one shade of color. Most human beings on the planet have a variety of shades. I know they like to try to, segment people based on skin tone, but actually every single person on this planet has a variety of skin tones that they go through, because they respond to the sun, just like you were talking about with the plants. Now, if we don't have sun, we all have problems, plants and animals alike. Especially us, because our immune system works in connection with the sun and in tandem with it.
Yeah, a bunch of coyotes just appeared in the backfield. You can hear them howling now. The dogs are going, something's in the backfield. So again, how do you protect your animals from everything like that? Luckily, you got a fence up already. What if you don't have any fence and you can't go by it? Then how do you suddenly have animals and want to protect them? Now that's something not a lot of people are thinking about either. Okay, you got the animals, and how do you protect them all? How do you protect anything in life? If you talk about the ice walls or anything you can do to get off complex systems. Oh, and you were talking to someone about the pawn shop earlier, saying people that are getting ready. I saw an article, I think it was either Zero Hedge or Drudge, one of those two, that said pawn shop searches have increased to, like, hey, we're a pawn shop near me. Because people are starting to get ready to cash in a bunch of their stuff. And it's kind of interesting that you come to the point where people are, all right, well, I got a bunch of valuable stuff. Now I'm actually going to go start selling it at a pawn shop. Like that's supposed to be safe for the emergency. We're not even close to that yet. Or we're in it, but not to the point where you're going to be selling gold to survive. Now you still got that junky money you can use, although it's decreasing in value every day, every week. But you can still continue to use it for now to acquire more metal, to acquire more animal. Buckwheat. I got 2 bags of buckwheat, and thank you for sending me the seeds. And here we got rose red Soba buckwheat and Takane ruby buckwheat. 2 different types. Seeds are a little smaller than the ones I have with they're all husked, they have everything on there. But I don't even know how to round out the hour really, except, think about how much distraction there is out there at the moment. And all these changes that are happening simultaneously. I think the weather and the climate and the magnetic field and I think those are the big drivers of it. So everything else has to be distracted away from the bigger things that are really happening. I mean, they set the excuse up for global warming 25, 30 years ago. So when you saw this happening now, there would already be a reason for it happening now, because if they're never with global warming and all this started happening right now with these extremes, you'd start asking a lot of questions. And notice how that's been for, the collapse of the economy. Well, they never really repaired it in 2009. Oh, they had this thing. Oh, there's a COVID thing. Oh, there's a lot of unemployment. Scores closed. Reshuffling. BRICS currency. Okay. Same, but different. They were already pre-broadcasting that the economy was going to change and shift. They already broadcast that the economy was going to change and shift enough that it would spook you enough where hey, we got to keep you paying taxes now. Keep you obeying the rule of law so you can pay taxes and go to work. Keep it just safe enough for you to get to work so you can put more into the system. Hey, I wasn't a corporation that blew tonight. Ransom Godwin, thank you for joining me tonight. It's DuByne right here, signing off for Revolution Radio Studio A.
Thank you for listening to Revolution